Okay, so we're gonna get through this. It's Tuesday, the 2nd of December, and it's gonna be covering the texture and stuff. Excuse me a second, while something's just not working. There you go. Sorry about that. Yeah, we're gonna be covering the texture and stuff. I thought I wouldn't need to do this, but apparently I do. So we'll just go through the stages. So I've already got a video. We've already got a video on the projection and the baking kind of stuff. So I don't need to go through that. But I just want to reiterate some stuff before we go into the texturing. Why we do that before we go in. Number one, we want to make sure that our head is retopologized, obviously, and or anything that we're retopologizing, body, likeness, head, whatevs, clothing, and it needs to be UV'd. The UVs we've already gone over how to create them, obviously, right there, so that's all nice and good. And I've exported them out and got myself set up inside ZBrush here. So obviously I've got my original Dynamesh head here, which had an amount of information in, but it had enough information in that I knew exactly where I had all my major forms, my major wrinkles, all that kind of stuff. I obviously decimated it to take it back into Zebra, into Maya to retopologize. In this case, I decided to do 35k. And then I brought it back in, reprojected it, so I could get all that information on it like that, which is all nice and good. Ooh, excuse me a minute. What are you doing? Yep. So I'm going to bring in that retopologized head again and shrink wrap it around this one, because between videos, for some reason, I've lost that file. I think it's on a work computer somewhere. This is why I should always back up. So I'm going to re-import that head that we saw in Maya then, with the UVs. So I'm going to... Oh, no, I don't want to do that. No. Z plugin. Import, export. By retopo. There we go. Now, obviously, remember that this will make everything disappear, but it doesn't mean that... Go away. It doesn't mean that we've lost everything. So if you just look here on the right-hand side, you'll see this little head here with a 3 next to it. This is telling me that this object has 3 subtools in it, which is going to be this guy. Even though these are different sizes, they're just because each kind of scene's got a different camera position. So if I go in this one now, where I've got my 3 heads, if I go and insert, you'll see there that we've got that head detailed retopo right there. Look at that. Fits perfectly. And all I've got to do now is just make sure, like in the video, that I've got my head retopo selected and my head detailed visible. Because I'm going to be taking the information off one and putting it on the other. And all we do is subdivide, project, subdivide, project. So I'll do that. Project. And remember, I like isolating stuff off, so I'm just looking at the low poly head. And almost like every time I go do a new subdivision, and then project again, the information starts to come out. And I'm going to take this up to about 7 subdivisions, I reckon, for this head. And every time you add a new subdivision, it takes a little bit longer, so there will be a point where you might be waiting a couple of seconds, 10 seconds, for every kind of new projection to come through. See a little progress bar at the top. I'll bring the better material. There we go, that's better material for what we want to see. So we're at 7 million at the minute. So when I do my next one, that could take me up to, well, it's going to take me up to around 24 million. Maybe more than that, maybe 28 million. But there'll be a point where you don't really need to go that high, because the information that you're getting in, you're not really going to get that much. You're not going to get that, a whole lot clearer than that. So what's my subdivision level at? Oh, it's at 7 anyway. Cool, awesome. We got to where I wanted to go. So it's 7.8 million, which is great, because this 7.8 million is really, really clear, really, really nice and clean. And it's not this horrible 31 million that's not got anywhere near the same amount of information like a Dynamesh mesh does, because we've built our own subdivision, we've built our own mesh, sorry, we've retopologized, and we can now make sure that all the information is contained in places where it's important, like the front of the face, all that kind of stuff, and not where it isn't important, like, you know, the back of the head and the neck and that kind of stuff. That's why we're always paying attention to the densities around areas, which is good. Right. So with that now, it's as simple as making sure that we're on our subdivided head here. Always make sure you save. ABS, always be saving. Especially when you're about to do something like a function or a process. Save it before you do it, just in case. Just in case. So this is Baru projection head. I can't type for anything. There we go. So let that save. There we go, done. So now Z plugin, multi-map export, normal map. So that's the only one we want to have selected is a normal map. And then in my export options, I've got normal here, normal map options. And all I want to have selected in here is my tangent, adaptive, S normal, and flip G. Those are the only ones I want selected. Okay, dead easy. And you could do a test on a lower resolution, so you could pick like a 512 or a 1024, 2048, whatever. You can test that, see if it's actually pulling out the map properly, and if it is, awesome, rebake at a high resolution. I'm going to keep this as 4K again, just for speediacy. But whenever I'm taking stuff from ZBrush into Painter, I do always do it at the highest resolution I can do, it's like an 8K, so that even though I'm never going to use that 8K map at the very end, what I'm taking from it is the high resolution information that I can use during the detection process. But like I said, in this case, I'm just going to use a 4K just to speed stuff up. So I'm going to save it out. I've already got one here, but I'm going to make another one. I'm going to call it Mary Projection, just so I know where it is. There you go. And we'll leave it, and it does its thing. When you have adaptive turned on in the settings, it does make everything take a little bit longer because it's giving you a better quality, giving you a better result. That's why you want to do a test without at a low resolution first. So you only need to have those 4 options turned on as well. There we go. So I should have done this at the beginning anyway, but what you'll want to do as well is just move around the mesh to see if you can find any bake issues and be able to tell, because you might have like a really odd geometric shape in the back. All we have to do is go down to a lower subdivision level, and on the lower poly version, pull that out or push it in to where it needs to be. So if you've got big like mountains sticking out your face, it means that the low poly mesh is too forward of the high poly to get shrunk in. Or if you have big canyons and big kind of dips in your mesh, that are kind of, you'll know them when you see them. It means that they're too underneath the high poly, so you have to pull them up. Luckily, this doesn't have any, so all are good. So let's go find that folder. Let's go to demo, and then Baru projection. So that's our head here, so we can look at it. It looks perfect. There it is. Parfait. Now that's all I need. With the ZBrush side of stuff is actually done. I've already got my retopologized head as well, or my retopologized objects in general. Because the only reason why we bring the retopologized one back in here is essentially to use it to produce our normal map. Or any additional maps. You can do, as you saw in the multi-map export, you can do loads of different stuff. But we're just using it for the normal map for now. And that's the same thing for all your different models. So I've got my retopologized head ready to go. So if I jump into Painter, hello Painter, we all know how to do this hopefully. File, New. Just keep it ASM, PBR, Metal Roughness, select, find that head. Put in documents there. Let me find out where I put that in. So always keep track of where you send in your stuff. Yeah, it's in documents, isn't it? Why isn't it seeing my files? Oh, gotta put it in downloads, not documents, fool. Again, have better. In this case, you know, I always go on about my my file organization. I am very, very good with my files. Obviously, you know, with the amount of stuff that I'm doing, I sometimes mix up. But always be very, very strict with your files. And that's all we need to do for this. So read apologize head, don't need to change anything else. Click OK. We get the head eventually. There we go. That's our head. And if I just reset all the windows, so reset my viewpoint. Pardon me, sorry, I keep sniffing, I'm getting a cold. There you go, so that's our head, all good to go. Nicey, nice. Now we've already produced one of our maps. So what I'm going to do is come to texture set settings, where it says bake mesh maps. We're going to be putting some stuff here, so just keep an eye on this. So we're going to file, import resources, add resources, go to where we exported that thing, that map we've just made. So that was in demo, wasn't it? There you go. And it was barrier projection, to bring that in. And where it says undefined here, we just have to turn that into a texture. And then where it says import to resource to project, just have it to project, because we only want to use it for this. So accept. So it's in. And then where it says select normal map, if we click that now, you'll see our normal map. And we click it, we just nudge the camera to update it, and there we go. We've got our head all good to go. Now, it doesn't look like it's most bestest. Obviously, I've got a few issues with the mesh, as we've talked about in class, like a little nick in my ear there. But it doesn't look like it's bestest because we're not at the highest resolution visually inside here at the minute. So, not that you should work like this all the time, but in our texture set list at the right-hand side here, if we click this 1024 by 1024 menu here, we can actually change this to be 4K. And now that's our highest, which is good. That's what we want. So we know that our normal map's in. We're all good. Now it's time to bake the rest of the maps, like we have done in the video already, but seeing as we might as well do it in this video as well. So bake mesh maps. Just click it. So this is back in your texture set list. Bake mesh maps. There we go. We've already got a normal map. We want to turn that off. We don't need an ID map. We want to turn that off. And then in common settings here, just make sure the output size is set to 8K, so that our maps we're producing, like these aren't going to be what are under final texture, remember. These are just giving us the best quality tools to work with. So your output size set to 8K, and then in your curvature, like that, just change method from generate from mesh to generate from normal map. We've already brought in. And then we just click bake selected textures. So go back, rewatch this, slow down the video, whatever, go step by step. It's a very simple process. And you'll see all the maps kind of develop and produce themselves. There we go, boom. So now we can return to painting mode, and then you'll see that all our relevant maps have now been produced, which is great. Awesome. So what we're going to do is save, because this is where we're going to start off with our texturing. So I'm going to put this in the demos folder, and we'll call this Barry text. Or Barry head, whatever. I think I called him Barry then. Cool. So how do we start texturing? Something is chugging in the background. How do we start texturing? Very, very easy. We just start anything like we would do with any texturing, painting process. Big basic information. All we need to do with that is just get our lowest layer of skin. Now this is going to be pretty much the same process for all different skin types. It's just you're going to lose a lot more information for the darker skins because obviously it's been covered up. For lighter skins, these are going to be a lot more prevalent. So for things like, you know, very, very Caucasian light skinned people, you're going to be dealing with a lot of reds and oranges and pinks and stuff. But then the darker in the skin tone you go, the more you've really got to observe the discolorizations in the skin and where they appear. And think about why they might appear. A really common one is in a lot of black people's skin, you have yellowing in some areas like palms, knuckles, forehead. You know, think about why that might be, and just basically approach that, you know, logically. But just to get this nice and easy and going, we're just going to, again, it's all fill layers. We're not going to use any paint layers or anything like that. All fill layers. So I'm going to put down a first fill layer. Boom. Like that. Paint bucket right there. Add a fill layer. Turn off everything except the base color. I'm going to call this base. And then I'm also going to make another fill layer and turn off everything except roughness. And I'm just going to jam my roughness really high up, just because I don't want any shiny skin at first. I just want a nice rough surface. Now this roughness, which I'm going to call roughness, nice big letters so I can see it. This roughness will always be at the top, so everything else will be underneath this. And because it's only carrying the roughness, it doesn't actually change any of the color parameters underneath it. It literally just controls the roughness. Okay, so this base, this is a very strong red, not primary red. We're thinking more like blood red. So, and you don't have to nail it early on. So I always say this, you know, you don't get bogged down in the details straight away, especially with texturing. With texturing, the way we're going to do it, like here, is you can always change stuff later on. You know, you can always change the base color, because we're not, if you paint directly onto the surface, you're committing to that color. But if you're using a fill layer, you can always change the fill layer tone, and then any kind of additional maps and filters or masks you put on it, they control what's actually where it's being placed. So I'm going to put kind of like a marine red, something like that. I'll probably end up changing this later on anyway, but I just want to start off. Right, so the next one, again, it's just going to be color. This is going to be an even darker red. However, this is where we're going to start using all the filters and the masks and stuff. So I'm just going to add a black mask, as per we've done in the past. To that black mask, I'm going to, so remember, I've got to have the black mask selected, not the color, the black mask here. I'm going to add a fill layer. And to that fill layer, I'm just going to add some noise. Doesn't matter kind of what noise it is, but the only thing I would avoid, is anything very very sharp or very speckly, lots of like sharp details. I want soft growing sort of about that. No, that's just too bitty. I want clouds basically. So what happens if we just look for clouds? There you go. So I'm going to go for clouds. Yeah, something like that. And I can mess with some of the parameters, tiling. Like that, because what we're doing for the first few steps of this is just breaking up the surface of the skin to almost think like, you know, capillaries and vessels and blood vessels and stuff, to then build the skin on top of it, to then build more life. You're going to go from a skinned corpse through to a dead person, through to a very sickly person, crackhead, proper person. And then to this mask, what I'm going to do is add another generator, but I'm going to, not a generator, sorry, another filter, but I'm going to add a paint layer, because this I can actually paint directly on, but because it's a separate thing, I can always turn it off. So, went too far back, add paint. Now for this, I want to get a nice big brush. So if I go to Windows, Assets, I can make sure I'm not filtering through that. I just want something nice and big and soft at first, just to break up the surface. I like cement too, so I'm going to use that. Nice and big. That's it. But I'm also going to bring down my stroke opacity, my flow a little bit. All my jitters are good. Size jitter a bit further up. There we go. Make sure I can turn on symmetry as well. That's always useful. Remember to rotate the light, it's shift and hold right click, and you can rotate the light. And I'm just going to start to, you know, take some off. In fact, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to go a little bit more hardcore with this. I don't know. Dirt 3. But I am going to bring down the stroke opacity, size jitter. There we go. And really, we do not have to spend very long on this. Like, if you spend more than 20 minutes doing this whole stage, you're probably spending too long for what we want to worry about just yet. All we're trying to do is just make the skin less uniform, less flat. Now, obviously, if you do stylized characters, you do something different. You would go the whole old-fashioned approach. You'd do your flats and you paint your shadows and highlights differently. But for realistic skin, it's all about the noise. Now, when you're doing mask work, so I've got this paint layer here, this is still connected to the mask. So if I press X, you can see it inverts. So white is we're adding the mask in. Black, we're taking the mask away. So I can black, stroke opacity down a little bit more, and then just break it up a little bit more. Again, I'm just trying to make everything a little less uniform. Oop. Oop. There you go. Don't want to do that. Oh, I've changed. Is it the? No, I've changed one of them settings. That's it. I literally can keep jumping back and forth from these. I'm just trying to break up this flesh, like I said. Right. Yep. Cool. That's fine. I'm going to add another fill layer. Well, actually, I'm going to duplicate this fill layer. And I'm going to set the whole layer to be multiply. Very subtle though, not too intense. But I'm going to clear the masks that are already on it, and I'm going to add my own. So I'm going to add another paint layer. And what I'm going to do with this is just start thinking about the darker areas. So where you've got build-ups of, blood vessels, or where you get darkening of the skin. So underneath the eyes, around the corner of the eyes, maybe around the ears, corner of the mouth, inside the nose, maybe under the neck. Maybe make it a touch more intense. Let's build up. Just by all means, do this with a pen. I'm doing this with a mouse. I don't really text with a pen that often if I'm doing this kind of stuff. But the reason why I'm doing this on a separate layer as well is so that I can control the taking away and adding of the mask, because I don't want the information I'm putting on here interact with the last information I put on. So I'm just going to work around there. So as you see, I'm not being particularly precious with any of this. And then I might even just do a few little splodges every now and then. And I can come in there with the black mask, literally pressing X to invert, remember? And I can just erase some, just to sculpt out some of that shape again. Because I'm still looking for, the blood vessel build-ups. Okay. Getting good, getting good. Now the last one I'm going to use, and in class obviously I went into a few more steps. You can do this really, really quick, you can do this really long. All this first stage is just about building up differences. The next one, again, I'm going to just colour, but this time I'm going to make it quite bright purple at first, but then darken it in a second. Again, add a black mask. To that black mask, we're going to add a paint. Now here what I'm going to do is actual discolorization, so like underneath the eyes, touch around the mouth. And the only reason why I'm making it really bright is just so I can see where it is. And then the great thing about it being a fill layer is I added that under a mask, so I can change this color to be whatever I want. But I want this to be like that. Cool. That's all I'm going to do. That's stage 1. So I'm going to make sure that I put all these inside a folder. So let me just click the folder icon. Call this base. Oh, I'm going to call this sub for subdermals. And then I'm just going to click and drag these in. There you go. So now they're all contained in one area. We're all good. Now it's time to make the skin. Same thing. The only thing I'm going to do now is just find a skin tone. You can find skin tone palettes all over the place. You can look for a skin tone of your own inside here. I'm just going to grab some kind of skin tone. I'm also going to change the lights, and this is very bright, this light, I've noticed. So what I can do is go to display settings, where it says environment map panorama. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to go down to the bottom, and I particularly like Studio Tomoko, so I'm going to look for Studio To, like that. There we go. So that's for now going to be my base tone. It might be too yellow, might be too red. I don't really know just yet. But what I'm going to do is do the exact same thing just with this. So nice big soft brush. This is really important. We use soft brushes now with low stroke capacity, all that kind of stuff. We want to build it up gradually. Whenever you watch behind the scenes of stuff and they go, I've been in the makeup chair for 10 hours, it's because they're gradually building up layers instead of just like packing on, like painting on swads and swads all quickly. That way you cover up a lot of, if you just dump a lot of paint on, you're covering up a lot of detail. But if you gradually build it up, you can see where you need to maintain stuff, or where you're able to. So what I'm going to do is just gradually build it up. And I've got symmetry turned on. Eventually I will turn symmetry off. And I'm just going to do a quick pass to cover everything. And then probably go in and, erase some stuff, maybe, possibly. So we've gone from a skin victim to now a zombie. So yeah, just go through. Remembering to cover all areas as evenly as possible. Because already, it looks like skin. It does look like skin. And having it at a lower opacity as well, my stroke opacity and flow, I find it actually helps to add inconsistencies, let's call it, to the skin. Again, if you just add stuff straight away, just like splam all at once, everything becomes very consistent, where skin is anything but consistent. It's only ever consistent when you put makeup on it. Skin is beautifully diverse. And this really hasn't taken us... This whole video so far has been half an hour. And that's obviously going through the whole projection thing, which took most of it so far. But as you can see, we're really starting to actually get looking like skin. We're coming out of the zombie world now. We're coming into very sick, quite old, possibly. I don't want to do that. I want to rotate. There we go. Try and keep the brush the same size. Like really see how big my brush is on my head and try and match that size. We can even cycle through and press C to get our colours. And you can really see how much lighting and normal maps help, because flat like this, it looks horrendous. It looks terrible. But, like this, it doesn't look too bad. But what we don't want to do is just use a lit version of it to hide it, because really we don't want to have one lighting condition try and fix all our issues, fix all our problems. Now what I did in class as well is go through using all these different sizes brushes, put different layers on, all this kind of stuff. I've just noticed I've made a massive boo-boo. I didn't actually mean to do this. I've not actually added a paint layer to this mask. So what I've been doing is I've been committing all this information to this one point. That's fine. You know, I could deal with that, because what I can do is add a paint layer on top of this, and then I can just erase it. You see, well, it's gradual because my opacity is dead low, but I can just use this paint layer as an erase layer. So, you know, it's not terrible. I can salvage it. Well, it's totally salvageable. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. See what it looks like back in this. Okay, cool. We're getting there. You can also do this whole thing with just using grunge maps, not even doing any paint layers or anything, just stacking grunge layers. The only thing you've got to make sure is you are changing the blending mode so that the fill layer on top of it doesn't override the one underneath it. They all got to play with each other, which is why I like doing like this, because yeah, it takes a little bit longer, and to be honest, my hand is hurting a little bit, but I tend to grip my mouse a little bit too much. No, just, you know, it's inconsistent. Right, so I think I'm going to call that pass 1, and then I'm going to make I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to duplicate this layer. Clear that mask, and also I'm going to clear this mask. Just clear mask. There we go. Add a paint layer this time. And then I'm going to do it again, but this time I'm going to do it with a slightly smaller brush and slightly more higher stroke opacity, just a little bit. Because what this gives us is tighter, sharper, not like sharp information, but tighter information, which is going to cover up and brighten a little bit more. This is now going to take us into like the druggy crackhead kind of realm. Now we've not done at all so far is any kind of reddening or anything like that. We've not done any colour zones of the face. We're just dealing with the general skin tone. And of course, you've got all the fun tools you can use, like filters and blurs and all these modified, because it is just Photoshop and crack this. It's just Photoshop. Because let me just show you what I mean. So if I right click, add a filter. To that filter, add a blur. I could all these different blurs, but I can blur that. And now with that blur, there you go. So what that blur is doing, it's blurring. And also, yeah, feel free to hide bits so you can actually see what's actually going on. So I can see where I've not covered up as much. Place I need to catch up on. Oh, big in there. Back of the head, hardly done anything there. And, you know, that doesn't, especially there, you know, that doesn't look like skin. Sorry, it doesn't not look like skin, I should say. It does look like, obviously, in bad condition, but it looks like skin. So what I'm going to do is step away from adding the skin kind of information. So I'm going to add a folder called this skin, and then make sure I put both of these inside there. You can also experiment with slightly offsetting these two base tones. I've just used the exact same base tone on top of each other, but remember these are two separate tones altogether. So what if I start introducing a little bit of yellow in one of them? What if I start introducing a little bit of colour different? Obviously, you've got to be very, very subtle with them, as obviously skin will not completely change values and stuff. But you can start, introducing a bit like that. There we go. Right, so that's a bit of skin. Now I can start thinking interestingly. So what I've got here, I've got all this information. You're thinking, well, you've covered all that information. What? I can't see it anymore. You can absolutely see it. Look at all. Like if I turn on even the base layer there, it's all like we're not really covering that much up, really. And if I change that color to be some horrible like lime green, it's such an obvious difference. So we want to make sure that, again, we're not going to cover up everything. We're trying to break up the face a little bit. Right, so what I'm going to do now is add a bit of depth and reddening to the face, and this is why it's really good that we've done all this information here, all the curvature, ambient occlusion, all that jazz. New fill layer, color, and let's just grab a bright red just to show you it first. So again, black mask, whatever. This time I'm going to add a generator. And that generator, there's a bunch we can use in here, but I want something that's going to give me ambient occlusion. Well, we've got an ambient occlusion mask, and we've got an ambient occlusion generator. So click that to apply it. It takes a second to upload, and boom. Obviously, it's not the right way around. It's, it's how the mask works on an ambient occlusion with an ambient occlusion is obviously a mask is if it's white we see it, if it's black we don't see it, and an ambient occlusion is it's black in the recesses, in the shadows, but I actually want this color to be in those shadows. So how do I make that work? Very easy. At the very top of this ambient occlusion, you got global invert. Boom, there you go. Already that's given me a bunch of detail. Look at that. And I can obviously just change the color to that, make it work for me a little bit more. What if I add another ambient occlusion on top of it? Do the exact same thing, but this time I'm going to change this one to be a multiply. So no, I also might have to filter through these to get the one I mean. That's one. What I got? Linear dodge. Sorry, linear dodge, and I can just decrease that strength of that linear dodge just to push it even further a little bit. But what about if it's in places I don't really want? Well, I can go into my paint and I can paint it out. So I can paint it out in places I don't want. So what if I'm getting it around inside the ear? Like I don't want it inside there. There we go, paint that out. Probably using a better brush than that. So my assets, I'll just get a nice big soft brush. Again, like cement 2. I like that cement 2 a lot. So I can use that cement 2 just to push it back a little bit. In places I might not want it. Maybe around the corner of the mouth. I think if you start putting information around the corner of the mouth there, it starts making them look like a bit sickly because it's, when you see people who are really strung out or not well, you get a lot of, reddening around these kind of areas. So using this, because I'm not really erasing it. It's still all there. I'm literally just using the mask, this paint section here to hide it. Oops. Or in this case, what I can do is even paint it in. So I'm going to turn my mask to white, and I'm just going to start to paint in a little. Oh, not that. Paint in a little bit of that information back in. And again, this is where realistic texture does take a bit of time because it's about taking your time. And a lot of time when you use these generators, it might not be doing the right stuff for you every time, all the time. So you have got to come in here using stuff as simple as just a paint modifier to just paint in and out areas that you do actually want it to work on. Now you can see where I really need to make a new mesh because this is, you know, it's not my best work and it is showing problems in the mesh. But you know, whatever. Not bad, not bad. My lips could do with a bit of work, so let's give myself some lips. Although that's a bit too red. I did want to just come back in. Let's make this a bit of a blue or red. Again, you can always come back in and mess with it as much as you want. Oop, don't want that. Yeah, so I want to get some lip colour in there now. And this is going to be similar to the inside of your eyelid. If you look very, very close at someone's eyelid, most of the time, the pink of the inside of the eye is generally going to be the colour of the skin most of the time. Always look at your subject, you know. What you don't want to do is have a person with very, very dark skin and very, very bright lips. It's not going to look right. So just always pay attention to your subject. But, you know, we're doing neutral skin at the minute as well, so we don't need anything to be super popping. So what I'm going to do is just, again, new fill layer, just colour. I'm just going to do something like that for now. Just to get it on. Again, it doesn't matter what colour I put on. At first, anyway. And what I want us to stay away from as well is very sharp tones. Again, it's why I love this cement. This cement brush is amazing. We want to stay away from any very very, very sharp tones. I've done it again. I've not added a paint layer. Right, paint layer. Add that paint layer. Yeah, we want to stay away from very, very sharp lipstick-esque lines to the mouth. If we do neutral faces, obviously, if you've actually got makeup on there, you absolutely want that kind of shape. But really, all I want to do at first is just get that skin tone in there. Or that lip tone in there anyway. And it doesn't matter if it makes it a little bit messy at first or if the skin tone's all off like that. I can clean it up. Or I can change the colour as well. It's never too late. So I'm working without the light on there so that I'm not getting distracted by the light too much, but I want to just come in here and clean some of it up. Definitely need to change some tones. Am I tracing the form correctly? Am I tracing the Cupid's bow correctly? He looks a bit scary at the minute, but that's fine. Okay. Like I said, we can just always change the skin tone. You can also just desaturate it as well. Not desaturate, but just pull back the... Yeah, just pull back the opacity a little bit. So I'm looking at this guy, he looks a bit kind of ugh at the minute. So what I'm going to do is go back into my skin. I'm going to desaturate this. Not desaturate again. Bring around the opacity. No. So I'm looking at two monitors here. I'm looking at my actual monitor, I'm looking at my Cintiq, and I'm just going to make a judgment call off this monitor here on my left. So I think I got a bit too much yellow in here, so let me just get skin tone chart, because I did eyeball that colour then. So I'm going to bring in a skin tone chart and literally grab one off this. Now the great thing is, in Painter, you can have an image off screen. So let me get that. Boom. That's the one I use. So I use this skin tone chart. So I got my shades and my undertones. I can use that one, and you can literally tell people by like grid position which one to use. So let me just. This is in my anatomy. This is in my anatomy Pure F as well. So what I'm going to do is, if you click on this paint bucket here, this eyedropper, even though I'm off screen now, what you can't see is it's colour picking from there. You don't always have to do it just from inside here, obviously. So I'm only kind of doing it there because it hides the bloody thing like that. You see what I mean? So what I'm going to do is paint, and I'm going to do the same one. So I'm going to do, let's do 1E. It's bright. See, that looks like on my. It's very bright. So it's at 2G. Let's go for 3G. I think actually 3G might be alright. Yeah, 3G is nice. I like that. I can do that exactly for the lips. In fact, I'm going to name this lips. See if we can get some kind of. So if I went for 3G, maybe I'll go for 5G. Nope, that's still too bright. So if I go for something on the redder, so I'll go for 7B. No, still too bright. 12B. Okay, 12B is not bad. So I'm going to go 12B on this as well. No, I think that needs to be a bit brighter as well. Okay. But listen, I'm just using that colour picker and that skin tone chart and the eyedropper just to literally remap those colours. Just going to come back in and add a bit more coverage as well. I don't know what these ridges are. Oh, it's probably the bake of the nose is a bit rubbish, but whatevers. Okay. Cool. So there's still a lot of that subdermal there. See how much is actually not being covered up? So that's really, really important. Right, so I've got skin there. You can keep going back, messing around with that. I've got some darkening of my eyes, so what I can do is set up another folder for that. Call this darkening. And anything which is to do with darkening goes in there. Oh, it needs to go there. There you go. And then my lips are there. Oh, I can put lips in there. Because I might not be done with my lips, but at least I can put that in there. I'm going to make a new folder. Always folders. I'm going to call this skull. Now this one's going to be a real subtle one. But again, it's just colour. Black mask. But what I'm going to do in this one is I'm going to start introducing lighter areas of the flesh. Yes, we've already got a fairly light skin already. But I'm going to start introducing areas where you might have a little bit of lightening, either controlled by... you could call it proximity to skull or edges of lips or anything like this. You'll see what I mean. And I'm going to turn off symmetry for this as well, at least up here. And all I'm going to do at first is just think about areas where the skull is closer to the head. For this first one anyway, I've done it again. I've started off without a paint mask. There we go. So I'm just going to think about areas where the skull is closest to the head Right there. Obviously my colour's not right now, but that's fine because I'm just roughing it in. In fact, you know, whatever, I can change it to a different colour. Let's make it a blue if you want to. Because you could say just this first bit with this colour is just like debug. I'm just using it to see where I'm actually putting stuff. Oh, yep, there you go. So I'm thinking about them areas of the skull, like what we call the horns right there. Maybe a little bit on the top of the nose there. Again, this is really strong, so let's just pull that back, right back. Yeah, just a little bit on top of the nose there. Yeah, just pull back a little bit inside the eye there. This is all going to get knocked way back anyway. Maybe a little bit on the cheek, just a touch. This is all really, really subtle stuff. I'm just going to take a little bit away from here. It's a bit too much. So what I'm trying to roughly represent here are areas where the bone is closer to the skin, and all I'm going to do is just have this be very, very subtle. But if we think of the colour zones of our face, what have we got? We got yellow here. Again, I'm talking like there's the colour zones of the face apply differently to different races, so you do look for that kind of stuff. But in this case, I'm going yellow, red, blue. Yes, I've used blue here, but whatever. So I'm going to go for a yellowish colour. And again, just knock it right back. Even using some blending modes. There you go, an overlay. It's subtle, but it changes the bounce of the face a little bit. You know? Adds a bit of warmth or something. That balance in it. As you can see, I'm using a lot of this just a colour channel for the time being, because I can actually see I'm not just dealing with flats anymore, I'm actually seeing the whole kind of colour spectrum of the head. And I'm using it like a makeup artist. So I'm thinking where these yellowy areas might be. It's not always just yellow, red, blue. There are others, you know, areas where you have some colour, maybe the tip of the chin. Around the jaw here. Looking at reference of people is amazing. Cartilagey areas. So in the ear, you've got tons of cartilage. Around the nose, you've got tons of cartilage. It's a bit intense, but you get it, you know. And a lot of this is such subtlety as well. Such subtlety. Oh. Alright, so that's essentially the colour zone of the face. I'm going to call these zones. I'm not going to skull, I'm going to call it zones. Let's give me a red zone. Red zones generally are representing more of the like blood vessel build-up on the front of the face. So the yellow zone, by the way, I've used that in here for this character. But if you're doing someone who's got a very, very dark or maybe kind of like coffee-coloured kind of skin, you can really use that to punch out a lot of really, really nice areas. The cheeks, forehead, some areas around the nose. It's almost like in that respect, I always think about it where skin is almost being like not necessarily pulled against the skull, but almost like getting pulled around itself. So around big fatty areas, the skin is allowed to basically gather together, and that's why you get nice dark areas. But then when it's being pulled across like forehead, end of nose, maybe across the cheeks here on the very edge, maybe that's where the skin's getting pulled a little bit more. It's almost like, you know, when you stretch something that's one color out, and it gets very, very pale because it's like literally you're seeing less of it. You get it. You're intelligent people. So put this overlay and fairly subtle. So I'm almost like airbrushing in bits now with a nice noisy brush. Across the middle as we would expect it to be. I think because Barry's a bit of an angry man looking, he needs it a bit in the middle as well. Around this area of the eyebrow. Definitely around the nose area. In the ear. Whoop. It's nice having features like this jump off. So you see how the ear now is separated away from the head? So it does just blend in. Another reason why we want to have the ears off the head and actually as playable things. Not just blending in, so that we can actually have this nice separation. And of course, if we want to take stuff away, we can always go with that. So I've gone very broad on my strokes at first to then push back. Push in, pull back, push in, pull back. You can just add and take away whenever, if ever you feel you need it. Is it saving? So this is why you always want to be saving. So I think I've just had a crash which has basically lost everything. But you see the process. You know, you see the process. You go through, go through, go through. What I'd be doing after this is building up those gradual tones. And just always checking, pulling back, checking. Even so, I've not done it a lot, but I'm even looking on the flat one even now, every now and then, on the actual flat version of the texture to see what it looks like. It does take a bit of time. This is not a process which is like you can get it done in 5 minutes. This might be like half a day to a day per thing. But what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to go from super basic information to getting more and more complex. Now, what I'm not going to do is start doing any like really, really intricate kind of stuff like that and like small little vein work. I know I did do in class where I actually got that brush which like simulates veins and put some of that on. And yeah, you could then go into like a reddening layer and reapply that in like around the cheeks or whatever. Someone's whistling in my ears. What's whistling in my ears? You can apply that around the cheeks. Or, you know, if you're doing someone who's older or has got like, you know, broken capillaries on the cheeks, something like that, you can have that really nice little veiny. It's like I think it's meant to represent a crack, like a glass crack, but it's really good to do if you're just very careful with it. It looks really good for veins. It's meant, you know, you can do that on the cheeks a little bit, around the eyes. It kind of ages people a little bit. I'll be looking at blemishes, spots, all that kind of stuff. So I might come back and continue the rest of that video, but right now I'm going to leave it like that. You've got most of the hard work there. All I'll be doing here is just starting to build up, you know, I was building up the reddening, building up the yellowing. The next thing I would have done is added a little bit of very, very subtle blue around like the 5 o'clock shadow area, maybe a little bit under the eyes, a little bit. And then, you know, go back in with a bit more reddening, apply it to areas that might need it around here, around the nose. Really looking at my subject, or looking at examples of, so that Daniel Boschung website's brilliant. There's tons of examples of skin tone kind of stuff. It's like where might it actually be fairly pale and white, or where might you get like really really dark? If you're doing someone who's got like dark or black skin, where might you get like really really dark? I'm looking at blemishes, spots, all this kind of stuff. Am I catching all the wrinkles effectively, or am I overdoing stuff? If I'm making all my wrinkles super dark and it's like they're everywhere, no. I only want the darkness in places where you're going to have buildup of blood vessels, or on the top of something where it might be a bit lighter discolorization. Again, when you look at the references, you'll be able to see this everywhere. But I'm calling quits there because it's just an hour now, and I've lost all that work, and I'm a little bit annoyed. I'll see you in the next one.